Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever found yourself standing at the edge of your life's path, staring into the unknown, wondering whether you are moving forward, standing still, or perhaps being turned around entirely? Have you ever sensed a shift so profound that the very fabric of your reality seemed to tremble, though you could not yet understand why? It is a question we must all ask at some point, whether in moments of quiet contemplation or in the storm of sudden upheaval. How do we recognize when God is changing our story? Change, my friends, is often misunderstood. We think of it as something we must initiate, something we must chase, as if we are the masters of our fate, the authors of our own narratives. But consider this. What if the greatest transformations in our lives are not the ones we plan, but the ones that take us by surprise? What if the most profound changes are the ones we resist at first, the ones that strip away our illusions and remake us into something truer, something richer, something eternal? It is a truth we would do well to remember. God is not in the business of leaving things as they are. He is not in the habit of allowing us to remain in comfortable mediocrity when He knows we are meant for something greater. But how do we know when the pen is in His hand and the chapter is turning before our eyes? How do we discern whether our struggles, our detours, our losses are not merely misfortunes, but divine interventions? Perhaps we begin by listening, not to the noise of the world, nor to the clamor of our own anxieties, but to the quiet voice that speaks beneath it all. Have you noticed how often change begins with a restlessness, a stirring in the soul, as if the life you have been living no longer fits quite as it used to? It is as though you are wearing a garment that has grown too tight, too small for the person you are becoming. This, my friends, is often the first whisper of transformation, but we do not always recognize it as such. We mistake it for mere dissatisfaction, for boredom, for the ordinary ebb and flow of our emotions. We tell ourselves that if we ignore it, it will go away, and sometimes for a time it does. But God is patient, and He is persistent. If He is calling you into a new story, He will not stop simply because you have chosen not to listen. The whisper will grow louder, the restlessness will deepen, and then, when we least expect it, something will happen. And here we come to the part we so often misunderstand, the disruption. Have you ever considered how frequently in Scripture, before God leads someone into a new chapter, He first unsettles them? Think of Abraham, called to leave everything familiar behind. Think of Joseph, thrown into a pit by his own brothers before he could rise to a place of honor. Think of Moses, plucked from the royal courts and sent into the wilderness before he could become a deliverer. And then, of course, think of Peter, whose entire understanding of himself was shattered in the moment of his greatest failure, only for Christ to restore him into something far greater. What do these stories have in common? Loss, confusion, a moment where the old life is torn away before the new one is revealed. You see, my friends, we tend to think that if God were truly at work in our lives, things would become easier, smoother, more comfortable. But what if the opposite were true? What if the sign of His hand upon us is not that things remain steady, but that they are shaken? What if the evidence of His authorship is not that He protects us from difficulty, but that He allows just enough of it to break us open, to pull us forward, to strip away all that is not meant to follow us into the next part of the journey?